Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the LitRPG Podcast. This is episode number 123 of the show. I'm Ramon Mejia, and I'm here to bring you the latest LitRPG news, reviews, and of course author interviews. This week I have 5 new LitRPG reviews just for you folks at home, and that includes Valley of Death, Apocalypse Gates, Author's Cut, book number 2 by Daniel Scheinhofen. Then we also have Alpha, book number 1 in the Jaro Trilogy. After that, it'll be March of the Gnomes, ArcOn, book number 1. And then it'll be Clerical Error, a challenge of Vircon, adventure book number 1. And then last but not least, The Two-Week Curse, 10 Realms, book number 1 by Michael Chatfield. Okay, we're going to move on, of course, to LitRPG news first, though. And in LitRPG news, we're going to begin with some nice artwork that Luke Chmilenko, author of the Sun Alliance series, put up for his series, his main character, Marcus. This is actually some really, really pretty stuff. I'm going to zoom in a little bit on the video version of the podcast just so you can get a bit of a better look at it. Great perspective, nice handsy-in kind of thing going on. Very interesting stuff. A little bit different stylistically than some of his cover artwork, which is a little more realism based. Definitely like it. So good stuff there, man. Also in LitRPG news, we have Alaron Kong. He recently did an interview with Gaming Mummies on Facebook Live, which is a Facebook Live group, Facebook group, and also they have their own webpage. They talked a bit about LitRPG, what it is, the Chaos Seed series, of course. We'll have a link in the show notes if you want to go watch that Facebook Live video, of course. Also, Blaze Corbin did an interview with Game Reads. Blaze Corbin is author of the Nora Hazard series, Secret of the Old Ones, and Delvers LLC. He recently did an interview with the new interview podcast called Game Reads, hosted by Sean and produced by Sean Callahan. In this particular interview, they talked about Blaze's books, Gamelet, and of course weapons and armor. You can actually see Blaze wearing his trademark look, his chainmail over his turtle, I forget what it is, the Total Master t-shirt from Dragon Ball Z. So all kinds of great stuff. And of course Blaze pulled out weapons and some other stuff as well, and they had a nice little conversation about that stuff. Link in the show notes, of course, if you want to go watch it on YouTube. There's also a Facebook page for there. But Sean Callahan, very nice guy. I actually did an interview with him as well. It hasn't posted yet, but I also helped him do the intro explanation video. So if you see me there on that YouTube page, that's why. So there you go. But good stuff. Okay. Also in LitRPG news, we have me. I was actually recently on another podcast called Drunken Dice, which is produced by Charles Dean. It's a podcast where the dice are the only things loaded. Is a really good catchphrase. I came up with it. I helped him out. But it's a podcast where Charles Dean and some other friends of his do play a tabletop RPG game. This week it was a custom Fate game. Blaze Corbin was the game master. The players were Jeff Hayes, Dakota Crouch, Charles Dean, and myself. It was really fun. I encourage you to go watch it. We kind of got drunk. It gets silly, and we all try to survive our murderous GM. It's a very interesting story. A lot of collaborative storytelling here. This was actually the very first time that I had ever played a tabletop RPG game. I know it's weird considering the genre I write in, but I just never had friends. They were interested in this stuff, I guess. So it was definitely super fun for me as like a newbie to this entire experience. I know Blaze helped me with like the character sheet stuff and some of the rules I had to read up on the Fate game system. But overall, just really interesting, fun time with a bunch of guys goofing off. Of course, always check out the chat room as well. And there was fun to see so many people just enjoying watching and making comments and poking fun at us, of course. So definitely go check it out. We'll have a link in the show notes for that as well. Okay, some stuff that is out now. I haven't reviewed though or read. Michael Ryan's World War VR. This is the second book in that series called Escalation. Just as a quick reminder, this is actually a republish of the second book in the Nagat War series. The author, another publisher, actually like a publisher of books and stuff, picked up the series, put a new title on it, gave it new cover art, and paid for some rewrites and some editing on it. So it's being published under different publishers instead of it being done by the author himself. So if you've read the Nagant Wars, this is the same series. There are only 2 books in the series so far. The author has always said that if these do well as this republish, then he'll actually write the 3rd book in the series, and he'll cap it off and continue it. But it only happens if you happen to read it. So if you've already read it, nothing really new. Apparently, it's just like reworking the story. If you haven't, it's an entertaining series. I enjoyed it. Okay, also out now is Steam Whistle Alley, an adventure in augmented reality by Joshua Mason. That's out currently. The author says it is, he described to me as creamy LitRPG in game lit. I'm not sure what he means by creamy. I think he might mean crunchy. I don't know. But he said there are stats and all kinds of stuff like that, character sheets, levels, just that there's no tables for it. So it might just be a formatting issue. But I've started at the beginning of it, and it's definitely bent towards steampunk and augmented reality. So I'm not that much into it, though, so I haven't, this is in a review. So just, it's out. So there you go. Okay, out as audiobooks now is Stone Raider's Return, Emerilia book number 6. It actually came out the last Friday. It just happened to miss the cusp of this particular recording of the podcast, so it just didn't get put in there. But it's out now. The ebook review of that got a 7 out of 10 from me. You can, of course, I'll link the show notes for all the reviews for the ebook versions of the titles. But Emerilia book 6, Stone Raider's Return, is out as an audiobook, so go check that out. Also, as an audiobook is Charles Dean's War Eternus 2. That is out as an audiobook. I got a score from us for 7.6 out of 10 as an ebook version of it. Jeff Hayes and Annie Ellicott do the audiobook narration of that. So if you know their voices, they do good work usually. And of course, links in the show notes for the ebook version review. Also out as an audiobook is Accidental Mage, LitRPG Accidental Traveler, Adventure book number 3 by CJ Davis and Jamie Davis. We give it a score of 7 out of 10 for that one. That's the last one in that particular trilogy. So if you read the other Accidental Warrior and Accidental Thief in the series, this is the last one in that particular arc. But there is another series in that same universe, like the daughter of the main character. So there's still more ebooks out of that. But we give a score of 7 out of 10 for the ebook review. Also out as an audiobook is Outpost, Monsters, Maces, and Magic series, written by Terry W. Irving II, narrated by Jonathan Waters. I gave it a ebook review of like 6 out of 10. Didn't quite hit it for me, unfortunately. Still had some good points in it, though. Go check it out. Go listen to the audiobook narration, of course, to decide for yourself. Link in the show notes for the ebook review, of course. Okay, an upcoming LitRPG. We have a couple titles that are new to the list here, but I'm just going to be reading off stuff for you. Restart to Level Up book number 1 is out on July 10th. I'm genuinely looking forward to reading this. It has a very interesting world LitRPG premise, so I'm kind of curious to see where it goes. Also out on the 16th of July is Regicide, The Completionist Chronicles book number 2 by Dakota Kraut. Super looking forward to this one. Love the first book. Looking forward to seeing this one. On July the 23rd, External Threat, Reality Benders book number 2. On July the 31st, it'll be Sleeping Player, Project Chrysalis book number 3. Again, that those translators of the world are working really hard to get these out almost every month, so good for them. Also new to the list is The Curse of the Hurling Ridge, World Tree Online First Dive, out on August the 1st, written by M.A. Carlson. On the August the 7th, Death March, Euphoria Online book number 1. On August the 30th, Raven Vex, the second book in the Binding book series. On September the 23rd, that's right, folks, are letting me know what's out in September. It'll be Freehaven Online, Lady Thunderbolt into Hades, book number 2. There's a pre-order up for it as well. It'll get me out on September the 26th, 2018. Then on November the 21st, actually the third book in that series, the author let me know that the third book in that series, Freehaven Online, Winter Dungeonland, book number 2, will be out on November the 21st, if everything goes according to plan. That's supposed to be the American Thanksgiving, like weekendish kind of stuff. So there we go, folks. On to new releases and reviews. And in new releases and reviews, we're going to be in our first review with Valley of Death, Apocalypse Gates, Author's Cut book number 2. That is such a long title. It actually refers to there was an earlier version of the first book where there were actually 2 books the author was experimenting, where it was like one that was super not racy, And then there's one that was like full on descriptive of like all the things that happen in the novel, including sexual encounters, graphic death scenes, graphic violence, and all kinds of good stuff. And the author basically found out that Amazon isn't so happy with that. They kind of consider it kind of going too big for the buck, but also I think the financial portion of it didn't really work out. Like definitely the author's cut where everything was like fully explained did better. So the authors just kind of continue on in that particular description that there is graphicness in here. It is 350 pages, $3.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. I will read you the author's description. Alvin had a rough week. Thrown into a digital death game, Apocalypse Gates, with only his wits and a less than helpful AI handler, Alvin's prospects for survival looked bleak. Managing not only to survive, but to thrive, he helped build a settlement of survivors in Green River, Utah. Along the way, he met with the sexy and broken Gothy. He's taken on the undead, mutated bugs and animals, and the worst possible enemy, other people, and triumphed. Nothing looked like would be a major problem, except for the flight of the dragons. Now the gates are opening and Alvin and Gothy are heading out along the roads of America. They'll need to earn XP, upgrade their stats and gear, found new settlements, find allies, and hope they survive long enough to explore the world and each other. The end of the world has come and a new one awaits. Welcome back to Apocalypse Gates. Ooh, some rhyming there. Like it. The author also does warn that the book contains adult situations in all their horror and glory, ranging from abuse to drug abuse to murders. It also contains graphic sex scenes, which contain elements of BDSM. You've been warned. So this is definitely an adult novel. So just heads up that there's cursing, there is graphic sex scenes, graphic violence, and there are definitely some adult, theme appropriate kind of concepts, like bad people being super bad because it's the apocalypse. So FYI. Full disclosure, I got an advanced copy for review. I purchased, of course, when it became available. For me, this is mostly just a fun action story. It's mostly a travel story with Alvin and Gothy on the road, killing monsters, schooling survivors about the new system, and sometimes killing some folks that need killing. They have some really neat adventures, but things are just going to get more difficult now that the apocalypse gates have opened, and all manner of crazy, fantastical creatures are coming into the world. Again, there are... Even my review was like, oh, there are some very graphic sex scenes. There's a lot of cursing, a lot of graphic violence. It's not a nice, cuddly world, and the story is definitely written with adults in mind. Personally, I skip the sex scenes. They are fairly regular, at about 1 every 15% or so in the story. Overall, even at that case, it's only like 10% of the story. So it's not a sex story. It is definitely more focused on the action, monster killing, leveling up, settlement founding stuff. But if that kind of content bothers you at all and you can't skip it, just don't read the story, because that's just the case. But if you can't skip it, it's skippable. All the sexual content absolutely makes sense. It's not just gratuitous. It's not just there to delay. It actually makes sense in the terms of like a budding relationship between these two kind of broken people. So it is very contextually makes sense. But again, for me, I'm deciding that in my LitRPG, so I skip it. I get to it, I'm like, oh, skip. Okay, there you go. Back to the other story. So that is what I do. Overall, though, the sex, again, even the sex isn't my thing on the story, again, doesn't distract. The action and adventure stuff is nice and thrilling. I particularly like the last couple of adventures in the story that pulled in more supernatural elements. I also just like the many flirty, cute moments between Alvin and Gothy. Like, one of the things in this particular novel, I would say in particular, that I really appreciate is the character development and the relationship building between these two characters. It is, again, very much like the beginning of their relationship. And so they're adults and they have sex, but even more than that, they also have these emotionally vulnerable moments. There are plenty of places where they're just like telling each other about their lives and their past and their futures, things that they like, fandoms and whatever the case is. So a lot of those like smaller, intimate conversations were actually very interesting to me, and they're fascinating in the relationship building between these two interesting characters. Also, this was something that puzzled me in the original review I wrote on Amazon, was that I couldn't find, there's a song that's referenced in this story about some pirates who sing this particular song about curvy girls, and I couldn't find it on the internet, and the author was very nice enough to actually let me know what the song was, and it's Curvy Girls sung by the Jolly Rotters. So if you want to go look it up on YouTube, it's a very funny, entertaining story, and it kind of definitely pairs into the story a little bit, in the like beginning portion of like their travel log through the United States post-apocalypse. So fun for me overall. It doesn't, again, bring like too many new concepts to this particular world, but it's still very much fun and entertaining. It gets a score of 7.4 out of 10 for me. If you like the first book in the series, you'll definitely like this one as well. There you go. So score of 7.4 out of 10 for Valley of Death, Apocalypse Gates, Author's Cut, book number 2. There you go. Okay, on to our next review. It'll be Alpha, book 1 in the Jaro trilogy, written by John Wally. It is 366 pages, $2.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited, which honestly doesn't make sense. But, you know, a lot of authors are taking their stuff off of Kindle Unlimited because of the things with Amazon. Here's the author's description, though. A group of friends are hired to test a new game linked to a powerful corporation. They soon find out that they are not just testing the game, but helping to create it. Outside of the game, the past of one catches up with him, which has consequences for them all, which will affect them the most, real life or the game. And the author does warn, there is cursing, there is guns, explosions, and sarcasm found within. So there you go. I'll be honest, that is a terrible blurb for the story. Like, it doesn't hint at anything really. It just tells you that these guys are testing this game, and it doesn't begin to even hint at some of the cool aspects of the story. The cover art as well, to me, doesn't do a good job of like accurately like representing the stuff that is inside of the game world or in the real life story. Like, there's a lot of cool stuff here. So just don't judge this book by its cover, I guess, or its novel blurb, because there's genuinely some fun, interesting things here. The novel has a kind of a slow start, and there are some issues with character description, which I'll get to a little later in the story, in the review. However, once you get to the game stuff, which is about the 12% mark, the everything kind of gets better. Like, everything gets more focused. There's more action. There's more adventure. And from then on in, there's, like I said, lots of action in game and out of game. So the real life story and the in-game story both have plenty of action for you guys. Story wise, it's definitely as advertised. It's about Jim, who's a kind of a paranoid former military man. Him and his tabletop gaming friends get a chance to test out the most advanced virtual reality game ever. And it's so advanced that not only do they feel like they are there, but that with some time skips, they actually influence the history and culture of the people that they're tasked with leading. Additionally, in real life, Jim's made some enemies that come after him and have their own interesting story. So again, I'm being a little vague here because the author hasn't touched on any of this in the novel blurb, so I don't want to say anything that he feels is going to be a spoiler, but there's definitely some really good stuff there. I particularly like the game mechanics. In the game mechanics, it's sort of a mixed bag, and that's because this game that they're testing is in the alpha phase, hence the title of the novel, Alpha. It's an alpha development, which means it's still being built and constructed, and it's in a very early test phase. Some of the game mechanics in the story change with every task, and they're kind of gradually revealed as the story goes along. Sometimes the characters roll their stats, other times they're assigned stats based on their real life capabilities. Sometimes there are health and stamina bars, other times there aren't. It's kind of an evolving system that changes based on player feedback in the story. But there's always this RPG progression with a consistent skill system. So in the story, if the main characters like display unarmed fighting skills, like they're gonna fight with their fists, then they'll get a skill assignment, and then how much they practice will increase that particular skill. So there's definitely that consistency as far as like RPG progression. There were definitely some things that I really enjoyed in the story and some stuff that I thought were issues. So I'm going to tell you about both of them. The things that I really liked. The fact that the real life story was as interesting, if not more so sometimes, than the game stuff. That's always a weird balance to keep in RPG stories, where a lot of times authors just completely trap their main characters in the game, so everything's focused in the game. And other times it's back and forth between. This is one of those stories where there's almost equal amount of time spent in real life and within the game, and honestly, it's hard to like keep both sides as interesting. And in this case, it falls a little more heavily on the real life story and being more action oriented. But I did like the fact that it was meaningful. The real life stuff wasn't just there to like fill time. There's definitely their own story arcs for the real life portion, and there's their own story arcs for the game portion. So good there. Although again, I felt like the real life story was a little more intense in some places. I also like the fact that the game world wasn't just another fantasy setting, although it is described very early on as being a fantasy world. In this particular portion of the series, there's it's more focused on it feels more like alternate historical fiction, or like the game setting, in that the main characters come in at a very early portion in the world's development, where the humans are all primitive-ish, I guess, where like they have like wooden spears, no bows, they haven't discovered range weapons yet, their clothes are very basic, they haven't even made settlements and tribes yet, and part of the game portion of it is that the main character and his friends are all tasked with like particular things in advancing these people's cultures and development, and depending on if they succeed or fail, how well they do, how they accomplish their task, it'll actually influence their history as they like skip into the next task, which may be like hundreds or thousands of years in the future. So really good stuff there. And again, I really like that particular aspect of it, in the fact that again, there is like a development of like more realistic game aspects. So again, not necessarily full-on fantasy for most of the novel. So there we go. I also like the fact that the main character had a great personality, and I almost immediately cared about him and rooted for him to succeed the entire story. He's a very interesting character. And of course, action. The action scenes in this novel are really good. There's a really great action scene in the middle. It was surprisingly good and high-octane action. So stuff that I enjoyed. A few issues in the story that I thought were there. This is one of the bigger ones for me personally. In the beginning of the novel, there are no descriptions of the characters physically, and neither the main character or any of his friends get physical descriptions. And I know some authors kind of go for a minimalist approach for physical descriptions. They prefer for readers to fill in that image for themselves, so it becomes a more intimate description for the character, because the readers fill in those details. But the fact that there aren't any at all, any physical descriptions, you kind of just get names like, oh, this is Jim, this is Sam, this is I'm going to say Dan. Again, and that's part of the issue for me, is that because there are no physical descriptions that make their names mean anything or kind of anchor them to anything, it was really hard for me to create mental images of these characters, with the exception of the main character, because you spend so much time with them, you kind of get personality traits to attach to that name. But for everybody else, they kind of became like interchangeable. Like if you told me that Sam was a cop and not a woodworker, I'd be like, oh, okay, sure. Because again, those names and those character traits don't have anything to anchor to, like and that's just a writing choice. But for me, it really made it hard for me to invest in some of the other characters besides the main character, because again, I couldn't picture them in my mind. And of course, once you get character traits established, it's hard for those to anchor to anybody, because again, there's no place for them to kind of stick to. At least that's how I felt going through the novel. This gradual changes, of course, throughout the story, and towards the end, it's like, oh, people get you see them enough that you kind of recognize them a little bit. But again, overall, the characters' names and were kind of interchangeable. So it is what it is. Cutaways. There are fairly regular scenes in the story where you kind of follow the main character and his friends in the game, and then there's a break and a scene that cuts away to like either the game AI or employees talking of the game company, or like bad guys talking. And while I don't mind the cutaway, or I don't mind the information I got, the fact that you cut away from the main scene and then you cut back later kind of interrupted the flow of that original scene for me. I would have liked to see them as their own little chapters afterwards or before, what the case is. And it's just a personal thing that kind of broke, like, oh, I mean, I'm enjoying the game scene, and oh, all of a sudden I'm somewhere else, somebody else is doing something else, and then when I come back to the original game scene, it's like, oh, what were they doing again? I kind of forgot, or it became less important, and I guess it just kind of broke the flow a little bit of those particular scenes. And this next one is a little weird. There's a really good fight scene in the middle of the story. I'm not going to go into details, but honestly, it was so good. it kind of made the rest of the fight scenes in the story feel a little less impactful, or a little less exciting by comparison. And again, it's kind of a weird thing to think is a little off, because good scenes should be good, right? But in this case, it kind of felt like it was such a great scene that it felt like it should have been like the end of the novel, and not just like the middle of it. It kind of felt like it was the climax of the story, and instead afterwards you continue on for like another, I think it was like 40 or 50% of the story, and everything after that, even though like there were good action scenes afterwards, including like the one at the end, by comparison, that you're always like, oh, this is good, but not as good as that middle one, which is, like I said, really high octane, like action, good stuff. You know what I mean? So again, it's just a small thing. It's more of like a kind of a pacing issue for me anyways. And one of the final things, the end kind of felt out of place, and I'm not the only one who's kind of thought this. If looking at the other Amazon reviews, a number of other like reviewers have kind of noted it. It's a well-written scene. There's lots of action, which is good. And again, without getting spoilery, there are things that occur at the end of the novel that just feel out of place with the rest of the story. There's like a little bit of foreshadowing, but mostly it felt like, oh, that's an interesting choice for things to occur. And it kind of just felt like at the end, it dips into like another genre entirely. And it's not something that's set up. I kind of see where the story is going to go in the future, as far as the real world storyline goes. And that's just something that's just kind of a setup for it. But it really did feel like a weird kind of turn at the end of the story. So it is what it is. Like a not badly written, very nice action scene, of course, but it felt a little off. So again, kind of a small note. Overall, I enjoyed the story, though it does have issues, of course. The original game design concept, and I really did enjoy the aspect of the in-game storyline where it felt like the things that the main characters did had historical impact for that in-game storyline as it advanced as it skipped like hundreds of thousands of years. It was kind of cool to see. It really did remind me of like Civilization, if you've ever played those games, like where you start at the like primitive portion of the timeline, and then as things go on, like the things you did in the past, if you've developed the science and technology stuff, well, that kind of determines where that particular culture goes. And that I kind of got that vibe from this particular game mechanic in the story. So I really did enjoy the fact that it tried to be different. For me, that was definitely a big plus for me. And again, the action was definitely engaging, no matter what the scene was. It's just that, some of the real life stuff was definitely more high octane than some of the game stuff. But again, just it is what that is. But for me, good time with it. It gets a score of 7.4 out of 10. That's Alpha book number 1 in the Jaro trilogy with the score of 7.4 out of 10. Go check it out. Don't judge it by the cover or the novel blurb. They don't do justice, honestly, to this enjoyable story. Okay, next review is going to be March of the Gnomes, ArcOn book number 1. It is written by Aaron Price. There you go. It is 198 pages. It is $2.99. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited either. So again, more and more stories just aren't available on Kindle Unlimited because of the way that Amazon has been treating those authors. So you're going to see more of that. Okay, here's the author's description. Sometimes it takes a noob. Alexis joins a struggling gnome race in a virtual online game called Arc Online. As a complete newbie in gaming, she has some rather unorthodox approaches to encounters that normal gamers likely would not even have thought of doing. As her online character, Yolo Tinkerpuff, she makes some weird choices that work for her. She goes from encounter to encounter using her logic to solve them. This is fortunate because with her stats, she is more dangerous to herself in a fight than to her opposition. The gnomes have to be careful to ensure that they do not get stopped again. Their previous problems all seem to point at an individual or group targeting the race to make it fail. Luckily, the gnomes have a new unorthodox noob, a colorful spider, a bored AI, and new friends to help them move forward. This is literature role-playing. Oh, that's right. There you go. This story, as there's a review portion of it, this story has a very interesting concept for me. It takes the worst player race in this particular VR game, the gnome, and the main character works to make it among the best and most powerful. However, the actual execution of the story kind of left something to be desired for me personally. And some of this is going to be like personal like things that bother me, and they don't bother other people. I'll let you know what those are. Mainly the main character feels like she doesn't earn something, unfortunately, and that's kind of a big thing for me as far as like storytelling goes, and making it feel like satisfying. The first 29% of the story, I'll be honest, was kind of a little boring, and there are semi-regular technical writing mistakes that make the dialogue feel a little stilted in this particular section of the novel. The main character, Alexis, again decides to play a VR game and is forced to be a gnome by the AI control system. There's an explanation there that sort of makes sense, but it's just kind of a way to like justify her being forced to be a gnome. She chooses a rare class and gets into a fight that she should never have won, and gets a bunch of rewards. And that feels like she should have gotten. The story gets better after the 30% mark, but I'll be honest, I almost put it down at this point because I wasn't really feeling it. So if you push past it, you might enjoy that portion a little bit, the rest of the novel a little bit more. After the 30% mark, again, things really do get more interesting. There's crafting, town building, dungeon diving, and pet raising aspects that develop after that point. There's lots of good storytelling opportunities here, some of which are fulfilled, and there certainly are some nice little stories that are told in the story, especially like some of the small background tales and personalities for secondary characters like Scarlet and Igor. I thought they were really fun and cute, like little stories telling who they are and like what motivates them. So really good job there. However, there are recurring issues in the story that really kept me from enjoying things. Issues like contradictions in the story and the feeling that everything is either forced or handed to the main character on a silver platter. Those things for me personally they kind of ruin my enjoyment because it makes me feel like, oh, this main character isn't actually earning these great rewards. And that's just a thing for me. In the case of contradictions, there are things that are established early in the story, like the fact that the main character isn't a gamer, that are later contradicted when she starts using a bunch of gamer terms and referencing game mechanics that she honestly shouldn't know about yet anyways. And in the case of things being handed to the MC, the main character, just about every fight kind of feels that way. Especially the first fight though. She defeats like a level 35 boss monster when she's level 1. With copious amounts of preparation, I could kind of see it happening that way, but there's just no way of her winning that fight otherwise. And that's not what happens. She kind of just stumbles into it, and she kind of wins, and without getting into like spoiler details. And so it happens kind of again and again, especially because the main character is not a combat character, like her race in general isn't. And so when she kind of gets a great number of benefits from a bunch of fights that she honestly doesn't actually participate in most of them, it's like, oh, that kind of makes her feel a little less, I guess, heroic in a way, because again, she's gaining benefits from stuff that she's not really working hard on. And it's kind of a weird compilation. Maybe it doesn't bother you, but for me, it's always one of those things like, oh, that makes me root less for the character. It makes me enjoy her rewards because it's like, oh, you didn't really do anything to earn them. And that kind of happens throughout the entire story. Without going into too many other details, that's kind of a big thing. Overall, again, while there's some very good story ideas and story moments, on the whole, it just kind of misses being good for me because, again, I felt like the main character lacked agency. She was kind of forced into a lot of situations, or it felt like she was just, genuinely like forced. Like there are characters that suddenly pop up, like you have to save the gnome race, and they're like, oh, we never would have thought of doing any of these logical things without you, the main character, ever suggesting them. And I'm like, that doesn't make sense, but let's just continue on with this. And that's how I felt through some of this development of the story. Again, it's almost a 7. I would say it just kind of misses by a little bit, though. So there you go. For me, it gets a score of 6 out of 10, though. That's the March of the Gnomes ArcOn book number 1 with a score of 6 out of 10. So there you go. Okay, the next review, Clerical Error, a Challenger Vircon adventure book number 1, written by D.R. Perry. It is 169 pages. It is $2.99. It is available on Kindle Unlimited. Here is the author's description. Daria Jackson hasn't entered Neuronet to play Challenger Vircon since her tanking husband passed away. A newly single mom, she quit VR esports to develop biofarming hardware for deep space exploration. For 10 years, Daria cheered her kids on as they fought their way up the CoV leaderboards while cleaning their VR cabinets. A forgotten login protocol drops her at level 1 in the game world she almost ruled. Strange glitches and authorbox from her past hint at a ghost in the machine related to her family. Daria's weekend project is supposed to be writing a speech to present to her perpetual biofarming unit at Explorer Command. But now she's caught up in CoV, leveling up to unearth a mystery. Can Daria choose between the game and her real-world responsibilities? So there you go. That's the author's description. First of all, for me, the premise of the story is a little of a stretch, and it kind of like ruins the introduction of the novel for me. It's kind of unbelievable that within like a 10-year gap, a woman who was essentially a pro sport player, quits. She gets a PhD and becomes a specialist biologist for like a space exploration company while raising 2 kids. And then suddenly because she forgets how VR pods work, she presses a button accidentally and traps herself into a video game. And the way that the pod is set up is like, why don't you just take off the VR helmet and open the pod? And the fact that she can't for some kind of unexplained reason, kind of starts the story off on a bad foot for me, because the premise just doesn't really make sense. And maybe that doesn't matter to you. But for me, it was just like, oh, that okay, we'll just have to work past that, hopefully. Now, in addition to that, the story is unfortunately kind of boring. It devolves into like a grind to reading about level grinding. That's kind of what the story is for the most part. The story is basically, again, about a trap mom who's forced to play a set of challenges with 2 randomly chosen players. And the end kinds of being kill mob and boss, get loot, and repeat. And there are some minor subplots with the main character, who's, again, a widow, trying to flirt with another character that she's interested in, who thinks she's flirting back with them. There's also a minor thread about figuring out who forced her to stay logged in. However, again, it's mostly just a level grind story, which, again, isn't necessarily bad. Except that the grind doesn't have a lot of like meaningful progression. As the characters level, their powers don't change. So it's not like they're distributing stats or distributing, choosing new powers at each level. Instead, all the new powers come from like the gear they get. And their levels really only increase like their health and their stamina and their mana in general terms, but also like give them requirements necessary to wield particular like items. Like the items have level requirements, and that's kind of all the leveling means in the most part. And then most of the new powers again come from particular gear sets that they get as they loot. So again, the story is like kill, loot, and repeat. And while the fights themselves aren't particularly badly written, they kind of feel repetitive because again, main characters end up using the same powers again. The descriptions are fairly similar. The monsters, while cute and interesting and have like really funny names and sometimes some very interesting characters, they kind of end up repeating similar fight scenes again and again and again. And if that's what you're looking for, if that's all you want, you might enjoy this a little bit more than I did. But I kind of expected something a little bit more in depth than just a level grind. Again, the actions, there's also a rather funny, punny sense of humor, which worked for me. Like, I like some of the jokes in there. But if they don't land with you, if you don't like puns, you're not going to kind of enjoy the sense of humor either. Again, the novel is mostly just fight stuff. And again, it gets kind of repetitive and boring, at least for me, fairly quickly. So for me, it wasn't that great. Good score of 5 out of 10. That's going to be Clerical Error, a Challenger Vircon Adventure book number 1 with the score of 5 out of 10. So there you go. Okay. On to our last review. It is going to be the 2-Week Curse, 10 Realms, book number 1, written by Michael Chatfield. So if you don't remember that name, that Michael Chatfield is the author of the Emerilia series, which is an 11-book huge series. Looks like the author plans another 10 books in this particular series as well. This is book 1. I think it says in the novel it's going to be 1 of 10. So this is 583 pages, a massive novel. It is also $5.99. So even though it is a little on the expensive side, per page, it's reasonably priced. It is a penny a page, which is kind of where I look for as far as what my purchase price is. It is not available on Kindle Unlimited though. So unfortunately, Michael Chatfield is one of the authors, like myself, who was sent a letter by Amazon saying that there's some suspicious page stuff and we might ban your account, or suspend it. And rather than take that risk, he decided not to take all of stuff off of Kindle Unlimited, including his new stuff. And so this is the consequence of that again. So there it is. Here is the author's description of the story. Thrust into a situation they don't want to be in. Too many, it would leave them panicked. For man, they would feel fear. Eric and Regret are different in that regards. Instead of being immobilized, it gives them something to look forward to. 2 weeks ago, Eric lost his legs and his arm. Today, he got a new message. You have been randomly selected to join 10 realms. One may choose to ascend the 10 realms, thereupon making a request of the gods of the realms. Only those who are level 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90 may ascend to the next realm. Fortune favors the strong. For a retired combat medic and marine recon sniper, the 10 realms provides a clear challenge and sense of purpose that they haven't found anywhere but the battlefield. How much trouble can you get into in a new realm? And so that's all the author's description. Full disclosure, I received an advance copy for review. I purchased the novel when it became available. So here's the review portion. Honestly, I knew from the start that I was going to enjoy this novel. The things that I've read from Michael Chatfield have all been enjoyable. They've all been LitRPG. So it was never a question there. And this is another entertaining story. There are definitely some things that were reminiscent of the Emerilia series that I found in this particular novel as well. So if you didn't like that series for whatever reason, you might not like this one either. Because there are some conceptual similarities. The settings are different, but you're going to see some of the game mechanics and some of the focuses parallel that particular series. And again, that might be really great for you if you like that series. It might not be so great if you didn't enjoy that series. For me, I liked it. The middle of the story, I definitely got a huge Emerilia vibe. The beginning portion of it, like I said, the first 30%, definitely felt original. You get a lot of new information, some new concepts. You get some new introductions to some other concepts like cultivation, the level requirements, skill building. The world in general is different from the other series. It feels very, very nice, very original. And the fact that there are 10 different realms allows for a lot of creative possibilities and like just 10 different worlds potentially with different, rule concepts and different cultures. The first realm definitely feels a little, I want to say Wishu. I'm not sure if I'm saying it right, but there's definitely cultivation aspects along with their unique magic system. They make it feel a little more original. There are also some themes that I could see from like what's it called, Monster Hunters. If you've ever played that game series, there are some influences there that you can probably spot in this particular series as well. But there's also crafting and some good stuff. Now in the middle of that story is where it kind of gets a little more Emerilia feeling, in that there is a kind of an odd shift for me at least to like town building and town defense. And in the context of that particular scene and that concept, I thought it was gonna be like super short. I thought it was gonna be, this town building, town defense. Okay, cool. This is part of this section that's here. I don't want to spoil it for you guys. And I thought, okay, based on the other challenges, I'm like, this is gonna be another like 5% scene, maybe at the most. It turns into like a 70 or 60% section, and it becomes like a really big thing. And it's just surprising to me because it just was for some reason. And as soon as you got there, like, this is neat. And then it goes on and on. I'm like, it's really good stuff. It's entertaining, but it really does feel like, something that you would also find from the Emerilia series in the focus in town building, community building, training of soldiers, that kind of stuff for like the defense of the town. And if you like that portion of the Emerilia series, great. I did. So it was enjoyable scene, but it did kind of have that parallel for me. But again, also a bunch of interesting new stuff here as well. So very action-oriented story, but also has RPG leveling, magical theorizing, combined with cultivation concepts. So there's a lot of like new things in here as well. Again, I'm trying to stay away from a lot of the story aspects because I don't want to spoil it for you guys. But again, I had a really good time with it. It was enjoyable for me. It gets a score of 7.6 out of 10. That's again a 2-week curse, 10 realms, book number 1, with a score of 7.6 out of 10. So highest score of the episode. So there you go. Okay, that's it, everybody. Thanks a lot for listening, for hanging out with me and watching. Remember, you can follow the podcast on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on our webpage, LitRPGPodcast.com. There are plenty of other great Facebook groups. And if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, because remember, this show only exists because of you guys. This is funded by my listeners and watchers. We don't do ads because we want to keep this free for everybody. And if you want to support the podcast in any way, shape, or form, you can find out all the ways to do so at litrpgpodcast.com/support. So there we go. Thanks again for hanging out with us this week, for hanging out with me. I keep talking in the plural. Thanks for hanging out with me, folks. Until we can hang out again, remember, folks, to go read some LitRPG. Goodbye, everybody.